Okay, morning all. I'm on the hunt for butterflies this morning, so it's another macro day, and I'm in the Essex countryside, and just to this side of me, and I'll spin round in a minute, we've got lots of brambles and stuff like that. So that's always a good place to start hunting for butterflies because they love, I can see one actually right over there now already. So they love brambles and they love this sort of mixed scrubby sort of undergrowth and woodland. So this is a good place to start. I'm really looking forward to a bit more macro photography. And I'm going to have a wander around and look for a few places where where the butterflies are going to be perching. Got nice warm sunlight and it's not too breezy. There's a little bit of breeze occasionally, but it's not too bad. And soft sort of wind conditions or light wind conditions are really good for macro photography in particular, and butterflies because they don't fly over a certain sort of wind speed. So yeah, it's all good. I'm going to have a wander around, and when I come back, I wanted to just talk a bit more about sort of macro kit because on my last vlog or a couple of vlogs ago I did one on dragonflies, and the one thing I didn't talk about was extension tubes, and someone pointed that out and they were absolutely right. It's one of those things that slipped my mind, so I'm going to rectify that today. But if you are interested in the vlog about photographing dragonflies, there should be a link sort of, you know, up here quite soon. So I'm going to have a wander down here, see what I can see, and we'll take it from there really. But it's really good conditions. I was a little bit worried it was going to be too windy, but that wind seems to have dropped really nicely now, so it's all good. And if I'm going to go right down the bottom here, and once I'm down the bottom I'm going to park up for a little while and just wait and have a search around a small area, because there's no point in just keep walking round and round. But this is, as I say, if I spin this camera around now, you'll see in the background we've got some quite scrubby areas, and we've got some areas where there's brambles and stuff like that. So this is ideal really. So I'm going to keep wandering down here and hopefully find a really good spot, and just be patient as always. Any type of wildlife photography, and it doesn't really matter whether it's big wildlife, you know, birds, mammals and stuff like that, or whether it's the small stuff like butterflies, dragonflies and other insects. You still always got to be patient. You can never guarantee that you're going to find something to photograph, but fingers crossed. I'm fairly confident that we're going to find some butterflies today. I've got the whole day, which is great, because normally I've got lots of stuff to do because I run my own photography business and there's always stuff to do, but today again it's nice. I've got the whole day to photograph. So I'll say bye for now guys, and I'll get back to you in a little while once I've found a nice spot to sort of settle on, and then we'll talk a little bit more about kit. So speak to you soon. So again, this should be a really good area here. We've got lots of brambles, there's plenty of birds around as well. So I'm going to have a walk down this area here, see what we can see. I've got my macro lens on my camera, and I've got the camera on a monopod, so if I see anything I'm going to be able to put this vlogging camera down pretty quickly and start concentrating on photographing. Oh look, there's one there. Right, now where's that one going to go? So there's lots here to, so as I say, it's just wandering around these sort of scrubby areas, and we'll see what we can find. But there's butterflies around here, and again I'm probably going to have to just find a spot and stay there. Maybe around here would be good, because I've got brambles both sides, this side, and I've also got brambles that side. Yeah, so as I say, this is looking quite a good spot here, and if we go down we've got plenty of sunlight, because they do like the warmth, these insects, which is great. And look, we've got a little clear area here as well, so there's lots of stuff that lots of habitat that both butterflies and dragonflies would like. So yeah, good. I'll speak to you in a little while guys. I'm going to wait around here for a while and we'll see what happens. Right, okay, so yeah, I've been shooting, photographing butterflies all morning. There's not quite been quite as many around as I expected, but you know, I've got all afternoon, so fingers crossed. And I'm going to keep my eye open for dragonflies as well. But I wanted to talk a bit about kit, because for macro photography, the sort of kit you use is important. Generally, I think you know, photography, it's much more about the image making than the equipment you use. But for macro photography, because it's so specialist, you sort of do have to think about the equipment you're using. Now, I normally shoot with a macro lens, and I've got on this camera at the moment a 90mm macro lens. And what a macro lens has is the ability to focus really closely to your subject, really close to the subject. So that means you can get a small insect or flower and it will appear big in the viewfinder and big on the digital sensor. And it's because you can get really close to it and the camera can, or the lens can focus really closely. And macro lenses are great. They're superb quality when it comes to the image, so great image quality. Macro lenses obviously retain the autofocus and the auto exposure, although when it comes to focusing on macro photos, I don't generally use the autofocus. As I explained in my last vlog on macro photography, I generally manually focus and then I just move backwards and forwards, and you see the image slip in and out of focus, or you know, go straight into focus and out of focus as you move backwards and forwards, and you shoot when the image is really sharp. So that's what I generally do with a macro lens. Now, the only downside of a macro lens is they can be quite expensive, anything from £400 up to £1,000 or more. So there are other cheaper alternatives. And one of the alternatives that I didn't mention on my last vlog about macro photography were extension tubes. And they're really good, and they're essentially a tube. So that's a really good thing to use because they haven't got any glass, they're just empty tubes. They don't affect the image quality at all, so you get really great image quality. And what basically happens is you connect this to the front of your camera, and then your lens goes on the other end, and it gives that regular lens, let's say a 50mm lens, the ability to focus really closely, which again means we can shoot a close-up macro image because we can get close to our subject. Now, the extension tubes came in normally 3 parts, so you can actually use 1 part, 2 parts together, or all 3 parts, and they just literally come apart like this. So if you don't want to go for extreme 1:1 magnification, you don't need to use all 3 tubes, you might only use 1 or 2. And the reason you'd only maybe want to use 1 or 2 is because when you've got all 3 on, it moves the lens quite a long way away from the camera. So the light from the lens has got further to travel through the lens down the extension tubes before it hits the digital sensor. So it means that your shutter speeds are generally a bit slower. And as I mentioned, I think in my last macro vlog, when it comes to macro photography, one of our biggest challenges is to shoot with a big enough depth of field, because the closer you are to your subject, the less depth of field you've got. And if we're really, really close, that means we've got hardly any depth of field at all. So we're shooting with big F numbers, which means there's not a lot of light coming through the lens in the first place. And if you reduce the amount of light coming through the lens because you've got extension tubes on, that can slow your shutter speeds down. So they are great, but you need reasonably good light for extension tubes. You can also actually, a very cheap alternative is something called a close-up lens, but in actual fact it is actually a close-up filter. And it's also basically magnifies your subject. So again, you can focus closer and it magnifies the subject. So it means you can shoot not 100% macro images, so it will mean that that small insect or that small flower isn't quite so big in the frame as when you're using extension tubes or a macro lens, but they're pretty good. And if you just want to find out if macro is for you, then this might be the way to go, because it's a few pounds. And again, optically they're not bad, and of course you retain autofocus and auto exposure because it's just a filter. So they're the main ways to shoot a macro image. The last one that I mentioned last time I shot a vlog on macro was a bellows, and I think they're the most least viable way, because a bellows, your lens fits in front of a bellows and the bellows moves backwards and forwards, and it gives you extreme magnifications, but they're very tricky to use. So I think my preferred option is macro lens, then extension tubes, and then filters. So that's the kit. Now, the only other thing I wanted to talk about was, if you are, generally I like to shoot when there's a lot of light around. So that means I can shoot with reasonable F numbers and still get a fast enough shutter speed to freeze any camera movement and to freeze any movement of my subject, because again, that's all magnified because we're close. So if a subject even moves slightly, that can give you a blurred image if your shutter speed's not really fast. So that's why it's nice to have bright conditions. What do you do if the conditions are not quite so bright? You can add supplementary flash. I'll get it out in a minute. And that's a really good way to put a little bit of extra light into the scene or into the subject. But I don't generally use an ordinary flash unit because that light is really harsh, and you get little overexposed patches and it bounces off the subject and it doesn't look great. The pop-up flash you get on some cameras is even worse because that's also really harsh, and the actual flash, because it's so close to the lens, can cast a shadow onto your subject. So that's not a great alternative either. What I do tend to like to use is a ring flash adapter. So I've got my regular flash. I'm just going to put these bits down. I've got my regular flash gun here on top of my lens. And we'll just pull this open. So that's my flash gun. And if I use this on its own, it's going to give me really harsh lighting and it's not going to look very good. So what I use is a ring flash adapter, and that goes around the lens and fits on the front of my flash. And what happens now is when the flash fires, the light goes into this unit and it travels around the unit via some prisms and mirrors, and it gives you a really soft, even lighting. A bit like the sort of light you get on a very light overcast day. So we get to increase the amount of light coming into the subject, we get really good quality light, and it's really soft. So that means we can shoot at lower light levels but still maintain a big F number. So these ring flash adapters are brilliant. You can also get ring flash, so the actual flash units are sort of round and they go around the lens. I like this because I've still got my regular flash gun and I've just bought an adapter to go on the front. So look, that's kit. I think that's about it really. That's all the sort of stuff, all the options you might need to go and think about if you want to do macro photography. I'm going to spend the rest of the afternoon looking for butterflies and dragonflies. I'll put the shots on the end of the vlog. I don't know if I'm going to get much footage of me actually taking the pictures because the butterflies are really moving around at the moment and I'm not in one spot. The dragonflies are easier to photograph in many respects because they have a perch they come back to time and time again. And again, I covered that in my vlog about photographing dragonflies and damselflies. So I'll speak to you later on. Fingers crossed for this afternoon, and I'm very much looking forward to shooting photographing some more butterflies. So I'll speak to you soon, guys. I've had a really good day today. I've got a couple of butterfly shots and I've got some more dragonfly shots as well actually, so it's been great. I've got a dragonfly in flight and I also got a dragonfly or a damselfly, I'm not quite sure what it is, damselfly I think, a new one that I haven't photographed before. So yeah, it's all good. So all that remains is for me to have tea and chocolate, which is great. But before I go, I just wanted to mention a little bit more about finding insects to photograph, in particular butterflies. Now a lot of butterflies, they lay their eggs on specific plants. So if you do your research and you know what plant that butterfly lays its eggs on, or what plant that a certain butterfly might want to feed on, or what caterpillars from a certain butterfly would feed on a certain plant, then if you find those plants, you've got a much greater chance of finding that butterfly. So it's a way to start picking out your species, which is not something I massively do at the moment because I've only just started shooting macro again. I've had a break for a while. So for next year, because it's getting a bit too late this year, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a lot more research and I'm going to look for specific species and slowly build up the number of different species that I've photographed, and that requires a bit more research than just general, this sort of habitat works for dragonflies, this sort of habitat works for butterflies, etc. So I think that's about it for now. Hope you've enjoyed this vlog, and if you have, if you can give it a like, that'll be brilliant, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel, if you can consider subscribing, that'll be fantastic. And then last but not least, if you've got any comments about this vlog or insect photography in general, if you can leave it down in the comments section below, that would be fantastic. So yeah, I've had a really great day. The sun's been shining, I've got my tea and my chocolate, so I'm going to say bye for now guys, and yeah, I will speak to you on the next one.